What if the oldest story of humanity was never fully understood until now? For thousands of years, broken Sumerian tablets remained buried, damaged, and misunderstood. But when artificial intelligence began connecting these ancient fragments, a strange pattern appeared. These writings were not only speaking about gods and myths, they seemed to describe human creation, hidden knowledge, powerful beings, and a forgotten system of control. Imagine standing in front of a small clay tablet, no bigger than a human hand, covered with tiny wedge-shaped marks pressed into wet clay thousands of years ago. To most people, it looks silent, it looks dead. It looks like nothing more than a museum object from a world that disappeared long before modern history began. But to the people who study it, every mark is a voice. Every broken line may contain a memory. Every missing piece may hide a part of the human story that we still have not fully understood. These tablets come from ancient Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where some of the earliest cities in the world rose from the dust. The Sumerians built temples, organized cities, recorded laws, tracked trade, studied the sky, and created one of the earliest known writing systems. They wrote on clay because clay was everywhere around them. They pressed symbols into it, dried it, stored it, and sometimes left behind records that survived longer than kingdoms, languages, and empires. For more than a century, archaeologists and scholars have been digging through the ruins of ancient cities such as Ur, Eridu, Nippur, and other places connected to early Mesopotamian civilization. They found thousands of clay tablets, but the discovery was only the beginning. Many tablets were broken, some were burned, some were missing entire sections. Others were found far away from the tablets they originally belonged to. A single story could be scattered across different museums, different countries, and different catalogs. One fragment might sit in a drawer in London, another in Istanbul, another in Baghdad, and another in a collection that nobody had examined carefully for decades. That is why the ancient Sumerian record has always been difficult to understand. It is not like opening one complete book and reading it from the first page to the last. It is more like finding the ashes of a library and trying to rebuild the books from scattered letters. The writing system itself, known as cuneiform, is extremely complex. A single sign can carry different meanings depending on the context. Some words have no exact equivalent in modern languages. Some lines are religious, some are administrative, some are poetic, and some are damaged so badly that scholars can only guess what might have been there. For generations, human experts worked patiently with these fragments. They copied signs, compared languages, studied grammar, and reconstructed missing lines. Their work made modern understanding of Mesopotamia possible. But even the greatest scholar has limits. A person may spend years studying one tablet, one archive, or one language. No human mind can instantly compare hundreds of thousands of broken lines across every related text and every possible pattern. This is where artificial intelligence entered the story. Recently, new AI-based tools have been used to help researchers analyze ancient texts, identify damaged signs, compare fragments, and suggest possible joins between pieces that were once part of the same tablet. AI does not magically reveal truth, and it does not replace real scholarship, but it can do something very powerful. It can search for patterns at a scale that would take humans a lifetime. It can notice repeated phrases. It can compare damaged lines with similar lines from other tablets. It can suggest where missing words might fit. And when thousands of fragments are examined together, a larger picture can begin to appear. This is where the mystery begins. As these ancient stories are compared in new ways, some people believe they are seeing a deeper pattern behind the myths. In the Sumerian and later Akkadian traditions, the world is filled with divine beings, great cities, sacred knowledge, floods, heavenly councils, and strange accounts of how humans came into existence. Mainstream scholars usually read these stories as mythology, theology, and symbolic literature. But outside the mainstream, some researchers and independent theorists ask a different question. What if some of these stories were preserving distorted memories of real events? What if myth was not pure fiction, but a coded record of something ancient people could only explain through the language of gods? The most controversial part of this debate is the story of human creation. In many ancient traditions, humanity begins with a single divine act. A god forms humans from clay, breathes life into them, or calls them into existence. But in Mesopotamian texts, the story is not always so simple. Human beings are often connected to labor, service, and the relief of divine burdens. In some versions, the gods are tired of work. They need someone to carry the load. So humans are created to perform tasks that the gods no longer want to do. This idea alone is powerful. It does not describe humans as kings of creation from the beginning. It describes them as workers, created within a system of hierarchy. Above them are the gods. Below the gods are humans, assigned duties, responsibilities, and limits. The oldest question then becomes more disturbing. Were humans created to be free, or were they created to serve? Some interpretations go even further. When different texts are placed side by side, they seem to use different names and descriptions for human beings. Terms like Lulu and Sagiga appear in discussions of humanity. In traditional scholarship, these words are studied through language, culture, and context. But in more speculative readings, they have been taken as signs that the texts may not be describing one single type of human. They may be describing categories, roles, or stages of human development. The term Lulu is often connected with the idea of a human or primitive worker. Sagiga has been translated in some contexts as the black-headed people, a phrase widely associated with the Sumerians themselves. On the surface, this may simply be how the Sumerians described their own people. But when these terms appear alongside work, obedience, ritual, kingship, and divine order, some readers see something larger. They ask whether the tablets preserve a memory of different human groups assigned to different purposes. In this reading, humanity did not appear all at once in a finished form. Instead, the creation of humans unfolded in stages. Early humans may have been imagined as limited beings, able to work but not fully independent. Some phrases in the tradition speak of clay, blood, breath, and divine essence. These are usually understood as sacred symbols. Clay represents the earth. Blood represents life. Divine essence represents the spark that separates humans from animals. But to modernize, especially in speculative interpretations, this language can sound strangely close to the idea of design, mixture, and modification. This does not mean the tablets literally describe modern genetic engineering. They do not use scientific language. They do not contain biology in the way a laboratory would understand it. But they do describe creation as a process. They describe beings shaped from material, given life, assigned work, and later transformed through knowledge. That is why these stories continue to fascinate people. They sit at the border between myth and memory, between religion and history, between symbolic language and something that feels almost technological. One of the most important places in this story is Edin, sometimes connected in popular imagination with Eden. Many people hear the word Edin and immediately think of the biblical garden, a paradise filled with beauty, innocence, and the beginning of human life. But in the older Mesopotamian world, Edin can refer to open land, plain, steppe, or a region connected with life between rivers. In speculative interpretations, this place becomes something very different from a peaceful garden. It becomes a zone of origin, a controlled environment, or even a testing ground where early humans were shaped, observed, and prepared for their roles. This brings us to one of the most important divine figures in the story, Enki. In Sumerian tradition, Enki is the god of wisdom, fresh water, craft, intelligence, and creation. He is often portrayed as clever, creative, and sympathetic toward humanity. When humans are in danger, Enki is frequently the one who helps them. He is the god who understands hidden knowledge, the one who knows how things are made, how life works, and how problems can be solved. Some interpretations suggest that the first humans were not complete enough to continue on their own. They could perform labor, but they lacked the ability to sustain themselves as a growing population or developing civilization. In this version of the story, humans needed an upgrade. They needed intelligence, adaptability, language, and the ability to reproduce across generations. Without these qualities, they would remain dependent on the gods or on the system that created them. Then comes the shift. Humans begin to change. They are no longer just bodies shaped for work. They begin to learn. They begin to speak, remember, build, organize, worship, and question. This change is one of the deepest themes in ancient literature. The moment humans receive knowledge, they become more useful, but also more dangerous. A worker who only obeys can be controlled. A human who thinks can choose. And once choice enters the story, control becomes much harder to maintain. This tension appears clearly in the figure of Adapa. Adapa is one of the most fascinating human characters in Mesopotamian tradition. He is described as wise, connected to Enki, and unlike ordinary people. In some stories, he has extraordinary understanding, but he is still mortal. He possesses knowledge, yet he does not possess eternal life. That separation between wisdom and immortality is the heart of his story. Adapa is called before Anu, the great god of heaven. Before he goes, Enki warns him not to eat or drink anything offered there. When Adapa arrives, the food and water of life are placed before him. This is the moment that could change everything. If he accepts, he may gain immortality. But he obeys Enki's warning and refuses. Because of that refusal, eternal life slips away from humanity. The story can be read in many ways. It can be read as a myth explaining why humans die. It can be read as a lesson about obedience, wisdom, and the limits of human destiny. It can also be read as a story about controlled knowledge. Adapa is allowed to be wise, but not immortal. He's allowed to understand, but not to become equal to the gods. He represents the human condition itself, intelligent enough to ask ultimate questions, but limited enough to never fully escape death. That is why Adapa is so important to this larger mystery. He stands at the boundary between humanity and divinity. He is more than a worker, but less than a god. He has been elevated, but not completely freed. In him, we see the central conflict of the ancient story. How much knowledge should humans be allowed to have? How far should they be allowed to rise? And who decides the limit? This conflict becomes even sharper when we look at the difference between Enki and Enlil. Enki, in many traditions, appears as the protector or helper of humanity. Enlil, by contrast, is often associated with authority, command, storms, kingship, and divine order. This does not mean Enlil is simply evil. In Mesopotamian religion, gods are complex. Enlil represents structure, law, and cosmic authority. But in stories involving humanity, he often appears as the one who worries about disorder. If Enki sees human potential, Enlil sees human danger. If Enki wants humans to grow, Enlil wants boundaries to remain. If Enki gives knowledge, Enlil protects hierarchy. This makes their conflict feel strangely modern. Every society struggles with the same question. Should knowledge be open to everyone or controlled by those in power? Should people be trusted with freedom or kept obedient for the sake of order? The Sumerian stories place this question in the heavens, among gods, but the question is deeply human. As humanity grows, the problem becomes larger. Humans multiply, cities rise, fields expand, noise increases, labor becomes organized, knowledge spreads, writing appears, priests track the heavens, scribes record kings and trade, metalworkers shape tools and weapons, farmers control water and crops. The world becomes more complex, and with complexity comes independence. In the ancient stories, this growth does not please every divine power. The more humans increase, the harder they are to control. They are no longer a small workforce. They are becoming a civilization. They remember, they build, they pass knowledge to their children, they develop leaders, rituals, economies, and ambitions. For a god of order, this may look like a threat. This is where the story of the Great Flood enters. Long before the biblical story of Noah became famous across the world, Mesopotamian texts told flood stories of their own. In Sumerian tradition, there is Ziusudra. In Akkadian and Babylonian traditions, there is Atrahasis or Utnapishtim. The details change from version to version, but the core remains powerful. A great flood comes. Humanity is nearly destroyed. One chosen man receives a warning. He builds a boat. Life survives. In mainstream scholarship, the flood story is studied as mythology, theology, and perhaps as a cultural memory of real regional flooding in Mesopotamia. The land between the rivers was vulnerable to catastrophic floods, and such events could easily become sacred stories. But in the more controversial interpretation, the flood becomes something else. It becomes not just a disaster, but a reset. A decision by higher powers to reduce or erase humanity because humans had become too numerous, too loud, too independent, or too difficult to control. The image is unforgettable. The sky darkens, the rivers rise, the world is swallowed by water. Cities vanish under the flood, the old order disappears. But inside one vessel, memory survives. Seeds survive. Animals survive. Families survive. Knowledge survives. When the water finally goes down, humanity begins again, but the world is changed forever. After the flood, the question of knowledge becomes even more mysterious. If humanity survived, what knowledge came through with it? What was lost? What was preserved? Ancient Mesopotamian civilization is famous not only for myths, but for real achievements. Writing, mathematics, astronomy, law, irrigation, architecture, and administration developed at astonishing levels for such an early period. The Sumerians did not simply live in villages. They built cities with temples, records, workers, rulers, and complex belief systems. For some people, this rise of civilization feels too sudden. They ask how humans moved from scattered communities to organized city-states with writing and astronomy. Archaeologists have many explanations based on agriculture, trade, social complexity, and environmental pressure. But the mystery remains emotionally powerful because the transformation was enormous. One world was based on survival. The next was based on records, monuments, calendars, and kings. This is where claims of lost technology enter the story. Some readers look at ancient descriptions of shining objects, heavenly vehicles, fire, radiant weapons, and destructive lights, and wonder whether these are symbolic images or memories of advanced tools. Mainstream scholars are cautious. Ancient literature often uses dramatic language. A storm god's weapon may be lightning, a divine chariot may be a poetic image of the sky, a city destroyed in a day may be a mythic way of describing war, fire, earthquake, or divine judgment. But speculation continues because the language is vivid. Some texts describe gods moving through the heavens. Others speak of terrifying brightness, burning destruction, or powers beyond ordinary human ability. To ancient people, any overwhelming force could be described as divine. To modern readers, the same descriptions can sound technological. This gap between ancient language and modern imagination is where many theories are born. The deeper issue is not whether the Sumerians had machines like ours. There is no accepted evidence that they did. The deeper issue is how they understood power. In their world, knowledge was not equal. Scribes had knowledge that ordinary workers did not. Priests had knowledge of rituals in the sky. Kings had political authority. Craftsmen knew metals, tools, and techniques. Farmers understood water and seasons. Knowledge was divided, protected, and passed through controlled groups. That is a real historical pattern, and it may be one reason the myths feel so alive. The stories of gods giving knowledge to some and withholding it from others reflect something every ancient society understood. Knowledge creates power. The person who can write controls memory. The person who can read the sky controls the calendar. The person who controls irrigation controls food. The person who controls metal controls tools and weapons. Civilization itself is built on the distribution of knowledge. When people talk about different human groups in the Sumerian tablets, this may be what they are really sensing. Ancient society was deeply hierarchical. Not everyone had the same role. Some worked in fields, some carried stones, some served temples, some advised rulers, some recorded history, some performed rituals. These differences were social, economic, religious, and political. But in myth, they can appear as cosmic categories, as if different groups were assigned their place by divine design. This is where the idea of a control system becomes so compelling. Whether literal or symbolic, the tablets describe a world where humans exist within layers of authority. The gods rule kings. Kings rule cities. Priests control sacred knowledge. Scribes control records. Workers maintain the system. The entire structure depends on order. And every time knowledge moves downward, the structure changes. The sky adds another layer to the mystery. The Sumerians and later Babylonians watched the heavens carefully. They recorded the movements of planets, stars, eclipses, and celestial events. For them, the sky was not empty space. It was connected to meaning, power, time, and destiny. The gods were associated with heavenly bodies. The movement of the heavens could signal events on Earth. Astronomy and astrology were deeply connected. In modern popular theories, one name often appears in this discussion: Nibiru. In Mesopotamian texts, Nibiru has been interpreted in different ways depending on context. In mainstream scholarship, it is usually connected with crossing, transition, or a celestial reference, often linked with known astronomical or religious meanings. But in alternative theories, Nibiru becomes a hidden planet, a returning body, or the home of powerful beings. Some claim it follows a long cycle and returns after thousands of years. Mainstream science does not accept the idea of a secret returning planet threatening Earth, but the myth remains popular because it connects the ancient sky with modern fear. The fascination with Nibiru reveals something important. People do not look at the Sumerian tablets only because they are old. They look at them because they seem to ask questions that still trouble us. Are we alone? Did civilization rise by accident? Was human intelligence a natural development, or was there a guiding hand? Are ancient gods only symbols, or were they based on encounters with something real? And if there was hidden knowledge in the beginning, has it truly been lost, or is it still buried in fragments waiting to be understood? This is why AI has changed the conversation. Not because it has proven the most extreme theories, and not because it has solved every mystery. It has not. But it has given researchers a new way to work with the ancient record. It can help identify fragments, compare texts, and rebuild damaged lines. It can bring forgotten pieces into conversation with each other. And when the fragments begin to connect, old debates return with new energy. Still, we must be careful. AI can suggest patterns, but patterns are not always proof. AI can predict missing words, but prediction is not certainty. AI can connect similar phrases, but similarity does not always mean one hidden message. Ancient texts are difficult, and mythology should not be forced to mean whatever modern readers want it to mean. The responsible approach is to hold two ideas at the same time. First, these tablets are priceless records of ancient imagination, religion, and society. Second, they may preserve memories and questions that are deeper than we fully understand. Maybe the tablets are myths. Maybe they are symbolic stories created to explain work, death, floods, kingship, and the mystery of existence. Maybe Enki and Enlil are not historical beings, but expressions of two forces that have always shaped human life: the force that gives knowledge and the force that restricts it. Maybe Adapa is not an upgraded human, but a symbol of all of us, intelligent enough to reach for the heavens, yet limited by mortality. Maybe the flood is not a deliberate reset, but the memory of a natural disaster so terrifying that it became divine judgment in the human mind. But maybe there is another possibility. Maybe ancient myths are not empty stories. Maybe they are containers of memory, carrying fragments of real events through symbolic language. Maybe the people who wrote on clay were trying to preserve something they believed was true, even if they expressed it through gods, rivers, stars, and sacred warnings. Maybe the truth is not exactly what alternative theorists claim, and not exactly what skeptics dismiss. Maybe it lies somewhere in between, hidden in the space between history and myth. That is what makes these tablets so powerful. They do not give simple answers. They force us to ask better questions. If humans were described as workers, what does that say about the ancient view of civilization? If knowledge was given selectively, what does that reveal about power? If the gods feared human growth, what does that say about freedom? If immortality was offered and lost, what does that say about the limits of human destiny? If flood stories survived across cultures, what memory were people trying to protect? The truth may not be as simple as the most dramatic claims. AI has not opened a single tablet that says everything we thought about humanity is wrong. It has not produced undeniable proof of ancient machines, hidden planets, or engineered humans. But it has reminded the world that the ancient past is still unfinished. Our understanding of history is built from fragments, and every new connection can change the picture. Perhaps that is the real revelation. Not that AI discovered one final secret, but that it showed how much of the past is still waiting to be assembled. The Sumerians left behind clay, but not complete certainty. They left stories, but not easy explanations. They left gods, floods, kings, workers, wisdom, warnings, and stars. And now, thousands of years later, we are still trying to understand what they meant. So the question remains, were these ancient tablets only myths created by people trying to explain their world? Or were they preserving a deeper memory of humanity's origin? A memory hidden beneath symbols, damaged lines, and forgotten languages? Did the Sumerians imagine gods because they needed meaning? Or did they record gods because they believed something powerful had truly shaped their world? Was humanity's rise simply the result of time, survival, and intelligence? Or was there a plan behind the first cities, the first workers, and the first keepers of knowledge? No one can answer with complete certainty. But one thing is clear: the tablets are not silent anymore. Every fragment that is read, every line that is restored, and every connection that is made brings us closer to the minds of the people who stood at the beginning of civilization. They looked at the rivers, the sky, the earth, and themselves, and they asked the same questions we still ask today. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Who gave us knowledge? Who set our limits? And are those limits still controlling us now? And as AI continues to read the broken clay of ancient Mesopotamia, the story may become clearer, or it may become even more mysterious. But that is why these tablets still matter. They are not only relics of the past, they are mirrors. They show us ancient humans trying to understand creation, death, knowledge, disaster, and destiny. And when we look closely, we do not only see the Sumerians, we see ourselves. So now the decision is yours. Are these stories only ancient myths, shaped by imagination and fear? Or are they fragments of a forgotten truth, buried in clay and waiting thousands of years for the right tools to bring them back together? If humans were once described as creations with assigned roles, then have we truly escaped that ancient system? Or are we still living inside a new version of it? If knowledge was once controlled by gods and kings, who controls it today? And if the oldest tablets in the world are still asking questions about our origin, maybe the real mystery is not what happened thousands of years ago, but why we are still searching for the answer.